Today's webinar is actually a very good webinar for anybody, any stage of the legal career or your legal career that you're in. And it's a good webinar because I think it's going to teach you what the battlefield looks like as an attorney, whether or not you're currently practicing, whether or not you're a law student, and the obstacles that you're going to come up against when you're trying to have a good legal career. And make no mistake about it, there are so many obstacles that attorneys come up against, regardless of how good your qualifications are, that can really leave you demotivated, can sometimes make you go into other practice settings, can create all sorts of problems if you don't really understand what it's like being a law firm attorney. And being a law firm attorney is obviously a very difficult job. It's more difficult the larger the law firm you go to, but it can also be very difficult in small law firms. So if you understand these rules, you can actually do very well in your career. And I've worked with thousands of attorneys. I'm going to show you today some of the things that are very difficult about the profession. It's going to give you comfort if you're feeling like you've been rejected or you're not doing well. And it's also, even if you are doing well, it's going to show you what the landscape looks like for being an attorney and how you need to navigate it. Being in a law firm is obviously, for a lot of people, many people, not that pleasant. You can be fired for a lot of different reasons. For example, if your law firm doesn't have enough work, you can lose your job, or you could be let go over something very petty, just like one person doesn't like you, or you do something that's not perfect on an assignment. And when you're in a law firm, you're going to continually face rejection. You're going to continually be criticized. You may even be marginalized. You may be lied to. And it creates a complete sense of like insecurity for a lot of people when they're working in law firms. And you often feel like you're being cast out. And the problem is really that different law firm cultures can be very negative, more than most other careers. I don't know that people realize what they're getting into when they join law firms, but there's a lot of professions, for example, being a doctor and different things, where people are actually welcomed when they come into the profession, and it's a pleasant experience. But the legal profession is a little bit different. It can undermine your confidence, no matter how good your qualifications. Your employment prospects often seem undermined. Law firms will often play games with you. And then sometimes law firms will just fire people right after they've been there for a short time. And many people never even make it into law firms. Like, they go to law school and they're unable to get decent jobs. A lot of people go into it and they may stay like 1 or 2 years, but it's a very difficult game. And I'm going to talk to you about that today. It's very funny, but I speak to attorneys all the time that have been like in the military and so forth, and fought wars, and then they get into law firms and they say that that's actually much more stressful in a law firm than it was being in combat, which I thought was very funny. But I've heard that from several people. A lot of people in that position, and I've obviously talked to lots of people in the military that went to law school, became so stressed out in law firms that they ended up leaving the profession. And these are people that were firing guns at people and things, and under very stressful conditions in the military. And then I went to school with this guy that had been a fighter pilot in law school. And he became so stressed out after a few years of practice, he actually committed suicide, which is just freaking crazy. And it doesn't take long for attorneys who, want to work inside of law firms, even when you're in law school, to realize that there's going to be a lot of rejection. There's going to be a lot of criticism. You're never going to often feel secure, and you're never often going to feel like you're enough. And law firm attorneys may be undermined, lied to, insecure, and it doesn't even really matter what level you're at. Partners experience the same things in their jobs. So we'll talk to you a little bit about that today. I was working with an attorney recently that had a $15 million book of business, which is absolutely astonishing. And he's getting rejected from lots and lots of very prestigious firms compared to the one he's at. And he's humiliated. He can't believe he's being rejected. He thinks that based on his book of business, he shouldn't be. But even at that level, not every door is going to open to you. I have lots of candidates that have come to me from Yale Law School. So people that went to Yale Law School are applying to our company every day, and they are used to doors opening for them. But they're astonished when they see that they can't even get jobs at firms that may have opened them come to them open arms when they're in law school, because they'll go into other things like public interest or government. And once you make that decision, it's almost impossible to go back to a law firm. So even they're astonished. I have one attorney that I know that is working in a law firm, doesn't have any business. He's paid very well, but he's constantly criticized. His hours are constantly criticized, and he's told he's not doing well enough, and constantly being told he needs to improve. And even he's not secure. It's very common for partners, for example, when you become a partner, to get when they move lateral. When you move laterally, the law firm will often tell you they're going to pay you a certain amount of money, and then they get there and they've taken all their clients and so forth, and then the law firm decides not to pay them what they said they were going to be. So law firms can promise people something and then they can pull back on it, and that can be very stressful. So I'm just trying to show you that all levels of the legal profession, whether you're an associate or you're a partner, the same thing happens. It's very common for the majority of attorneys in a firm, whether it's associates, counsel, or partners, to feel insecure. They'll get reviews, and in these reviews, they're told they're not enough. And then the firm will come back and say, oh, we're going to check with you back in a few months, and they'll feel insecure. They do this with partners. They come up with different types of performance evaluations that make people feel like they're never doing enough. And it can be very stressful for anybody at any level of their career. And that's something that, unless you have your own practice or unless you find the right firm, it's going to basically follow you your entire career. Most attorneys, by the way, and you may be in this category, most attorneys get fired, often more than once. As a matter of fact, I would say the majority of attorneys are fired more than once. So if you've been fired, you were perfect. It's perfectly normal. It's a learning experience. But many times when you're fired, there's just a lot of hostility, and you're made to feel that people you're very disapproved of, and you're not a good attorney, and all these different types of things, even though you may be a good attorney, you may just need more time to learn. The idea of a law firm and the way they kind of work is, with some exceptions, most people try to make them feel that they're never enough, that with that type of mentality, you're supposed to try to work harder and do better work and bill more hours. But you're constantly often feeling insecure about your prospects. And I'm not saying this happens at all firms, because it doesn't. I'm not saying it happens in all economies, because it doesn't. If the economy is really good and they need people, they will slow down on this. There's certain firms where you can be isolated from this, but typically the higher and the better firm you're trying to get into, the more that you're going to see. And the only times an attorney really does feel secure, and there are a few sweet spots in a career, is often when they're a summer associate. Law firms can be very nice to law students. And then most often between your third and sixth year of practice, which is when you're most marketable, and when you know what you're doing, billing rates are low enough that law firms want to hold on to you. So once you get into your third and sixth year, in most well-run institutional law firms, you will start getting very good reviews. You'll be told you're doing a really good job. You'll be enthusiastic and think that's going to last forever. But when you get into, when you get later in your career, whether it's the first couple of years can be very difficult in terms of reviews, and then pretty much the rest of your career after your sixth or seventh year can become very stressful, because you're never going to feel like you're doing enough. So I'm going to discuss all these reasons today in this webinar. This is a live webinar. I will take questions at the end, and we'll go through these slides in this presentation. And then if you have any questions you can think of, then just put them in the chat, and then we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. And feel free, by the way, to ask questions about anything related to this webinar, or just any questions in general you might have, because it's always useful to ask those. Okay, so the first thing is rejection. So you're pretty much going to always receive a rejection throughout most of your legal career. The first thing is that even to get into the law firm early in your career, the better the law firm you want to get into, the better grades you're going to have, the better schools. You're going to have certain personality characteristics that mesh with the people and the firms you're trying to get a job with. And you're going to have certain things that most attorneys simply do not have. There's the top 1%, the top 5%, but even if you're in like the top 10%, you probably won't get to where you want to be in terms of your law school and your grades and everything, in terms of how you compare to other people. And even as you get more and more down the line, it becomes harder and harder. So you're going to pretty much experience, most attorneys receive a huge amount of rejection from almost every employer that they apply to. So most employers will not interview you. And so you're applying to all these places, and you're thinking that when you go to law school, the doors are going to open and so forth, but doors often will not open. And if they open, they may not be the kind of doors you want. So you may want to get a summer associate job in a large law firm, and then the only job you can get is something paying $25 or $40 an hour working in the summer, which is not probably the kind of firm you want to be into. So you'll feel rejected early in your career. And even if this is just something to let you know, even if you're at the very top of your class from a top law school, you're still going to experience rejection, because the firms you interview with are not all will not interview, or they will not call you back after interviews, and then you'll just be rejected and you won't even know why, and then you get rejected after you interview. And a lot of times people will not get into the type of firms they want as law students. They'll feel badly about themselves, and they'll spend the remainder of their careers trying to put themselves in a position where they're not going to get rejected and they will find acceptance, which is possible. But they try to get the right experience and try to build books of business so they can get into larger firms. And people do this, but they often do it in response to initial rejection. It just gets them fired up instead of depressed, and they start fixing. And then even after fixing your resume, getting business and things, you're still going to experience a lot of rejection. So it's important to understand that there's so much rejection in the legal profession. If you apply to 20 law firms, you'll probably be lucky to get one interview. If you apply to 20 jobs, you'll probably be lucky to get one interview. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get jobs in law firms. We have candidates at BCG that I can always get people jobs, but they have to apply to a lot of places and they have to experience a lot of rejection. I was reviewing some resumes just not too long ago. One was an attorney who graduated from Columbia Law School, is currently clerking for a federal judge. And he wrote me a cover letter and it said, I've downloaded a list of all the top law firms I can find. And he's looking at the AmLaw 100 and 200. And I've applied to 250 firms and haven't received a single interview. So this is someone that went to a top 10 law school that's clerking for a federal judge and applied to 250 places and didn't get a single interview. This should show you like how difficult it is to get these jobs, because this is someone that you would think would get all these interviews, but they're not getting any luck. And so I want you to understand that if you're not getting jobs and you're putting a lot of effort and you're applying to a lot of places, regardless of your qualifications, you're going to experience a lot of rejection. And it's not easy. Now, one thing I just want to tell you too at the beginning, if you are experiencing a lot of rejection, which again, most attorneys do, when you're applying to places to work, and if they don't interview you, the only reason they're not interviewing you is it could be they don't like your pedigree and so forth. But generally, it's just because there's not a business case to bring you in. Like they don't feel like they have enough work or they can make money if they hire you, or there's better applicants. There's all sorts of reasons. But you also need to understand there's a lot of things with market dynamics. So I have a friend of mine that's staying with me right now, and he's probably the most successful legal recruiter in Asia. So he's been placing people from the US that speak Chinese that are doing corporate M&A and stuff, and he places them in Hong Kong and China. And so this year, there's only been and last year, there was maybe 10 or 15 of firms that hired lateral associates in China because the work has slowed down. And prior to that, there might have been 150. So it's not the candidate's fault that they're not getting jobs, just the market. So the market can affect things. And then you may not understand what's going on when you're applying to places and getting rejected with the market. So here are the sorts of people that I just want to, you may be a part of one of these groups that experience the most rejection typically when they're looking for positions. So if you're a law student and you're not a top law school, if you're not from a top law school, top grades, you're going to have a lot of rejection. If you're trying to find a place that is going to pay you well or is the location you want, you're going to receive rejection after rejection from these firms. It's just how it is. There's just most people in that situation will apply to a lot of places and they will get rejected. Not that's at the top firms, but it can even be at mid-level firms. If you have more than 5 years experience, it doesn't really matter what type of firm and the caliber of firm you're at. Your experience will actually start counting against you. It becomes much more difficult to get positions because at that point in your career, you're expected to be at a firm where you're a big partner, your billing rates get higher, so it becomes much more difficult for an attorney once you get 5 years of experience. The sweet spot for getting the job is between 2 and 5. But once you get into 6 or 7, it becomes incredibly demoralizing. And law firms will just repel you. I like to use an analogy of a bug light or Texas barbecue. It repels them just instantly, and it's very difficult to get in. And even sometimes not even the best law firms will want anything to do with it. So it's very scary. You get more experience, but you become less and less marketable. And I have people that have worked with me that I'm still working with. They may have applied to 300 firms and gotten 1 or 2 interviews, and they continually keep applying. And these are people that, are at AmLaw 100 law firms trying to move laterally to other firms, and not even, mid-level firms are interested in them. And this is the dynamic that happens. If you, for some reason, are not currently working, that will create massive amounts of rejection. It's important to understand there's all these people now that are quitting these big firms because I was talking again to this recruiter that's staying with me from Hong Kong last night, and all these people are quitting these big firms because they don't like the political stance that from the people taking for the Trump administration or caving into what he wants, and so they're quitting all these big firms like Latham & Watkins and Kirkland and stuff. And that's pretty much the dumbest career move you could make, because if you're not currently working, it's probably 10 to 15 times more difficult to get a job than if you are working, because it shows that you could leave because you don't like the Trump administration, or it shows you could leave because or you were fired. People just don't know. So if you're not currently working, that's something that will put you in a position of just getting huge amounts of rejection, and even from less prestigious firms. Because if you're working, there's not really a lot of questions about you. But if you're not, so this is another thing that creates a lot of rejection. If you didn't get a job as a summer associate, then you're trying to apply to firms to be an associate when you graduate. I mean, then you're going to experience a lot more rejection than if you didn't get a job as a summer associate, or whatever your reasons are for not working. It makes your job search incredibly much more difficult because you're competing with people that are working and there's no questions. If you decide to go in-house and try to go into a law firm, or if you decide to go to the government or another practice setting, you're also going to experience an incredible amount of rejection. So these are all things that I see each day. I see people that are unemployed. I see people that are too senior. I see people that are coming from other practice settings. So if you're coming from in-house, the government, or the practice setting, most law firms are going to want absolutely nothing to do with you. They will just instantly reject them once they see they're in another practice setting and move on to other candidates. They want to hire people that are coming directly from law firms. They do not want to hire people that are from other practice settings, because if you go into another practice setting, it shows you'll probably leave a law firm again because you didn't want to be in a law firm practice setting, or maybe you couldn't get a job in another practice setting. For example, people that want to be tax attorneys will go to accounting firms and try to get back in. Almost impossible to get back into a law firm. There's just so many mistakes that people make. But if you're trying to get a job in a law firm, you really can never go into another practice setting. You have to stay there. If you're trying to get a job in a law firm, you should never quit a job. You should always try to get a job while you're employed. Sometimes you may be trying to find a job during a legal recession. Legal recessions are another big thing. So there are legal recessions all the time. There are legal recessions in different practice areas. So if you're a corporate attorney and a legal recession comes, it can be absolutely impossible to find jobs in other large law firms. It's just law firms will not open the door to you because there's no work and they're letting people go. So people will try to find jobs in legal recessions and have issues. Another thing too is sometimes you might be in the wrong practice area. So right now there's a lot of practice areas that are very slow where you're going to experience rejection. So you will experience a lot of rejection right now, for example, in multiple practice areas. Like trademarks, very difficult. There's just all these different practice areas where there's just not a lot of work, and you won't know you won't be getting jobs, and it's just because there's an oversupply of attorneys like you in the market, and that can be and then you will be rejected for those reasons. Some people never learn how to interview well and get rejected. I have people that I've worked with that have gone out on 20 interviews, often prior to working with me, and not gotten a single job. And they may not get jobs because they're doing all sorts of things wrong. In their interviews, they're not connecting. They may not look right. They may say the wrong things. They may expect to be treated a certain way and think they're very marketable. They may lack self-confidence. They may give off the wrong vibes, but whatever they do, they're not interviewing well. And most people that don't interview well never learn what they need to do to interview. So if you're getting a lot of rejection because even if you're getting interviews, I would highly recommend that you review all the materials that I've ever written about interviewing, or I've written books about them and things, and you can find them online. But you need to close interviews much better. And just to give you some insight into what the odds are, typically someone that goes out in an interview, there's from the first interview to getting the job offer, there's about a 1 in 8 chance that you'll get the job. So really, the average attorney needs to interview with about 8 places before they actually get a job. So when I work with people, I increase those odds dramatically, like probably to 6 out of 8 interviews they can get a job. But there's just a lot of things you need to do to learn how to interview well. So even if you have a good resume and things, you may not. But the point is that most attorneys are rejected, and there's just a ton of rejection out there. And if someone tells you something differently, then that they're not getting rejected, then they're not telling you the truth. There's just too many people for almost every job or every firm that you're applying to that it's very difficult. So you should understand that you literally could apply to 300 firms and get 1 interview. And that's just how it works. It has nothing often to do with you. There's just a lot of rejection in the legal community. And it's hard for me because our company works with so many people. And when we work with them, almost anybody I work with, I can get a job if they're open to looking at different size firms, if they're open to applying to enough places. But people often get very discouraged when they're applying to 30 places and don't get a single interview. And the reason they're not getting the interviews could be multiple different things, but Often those reasons are related to just the market and there's better people there and it's nothing for them to be concerned about. They just need to keep applying, but most people don't. So you need to understand too that most law firms out there, when there's a job opening, will receive a lot of applications. Now, that's not for every type of job. So there are jobs in different geographic locations where there's not a lot of attorneys like a certain type of person. But if you're in a decent sized geographical area, then every law firm might receive 100 or 200 applicants for just one position. And sometimes they'll even receive more than that. They may receive 300. If you have the commercial litigation opening at a firm in New York City, literally those numbers might be in the hundreds of people that are applying for that job. So if there's someone better than you that comes along, then they're likely to interview that person instead of you. If you apply early, if people apply early to the position, like in the first week or so, the law firm will often start interviewing from that group of candidates. And even if the job has been stays open for a couple of months while they're interviewing and so forth, they'll typically only interview from the first candidates that come in. It's something to keep in mind. You have that. And if a law firm is interviewing, like I said, 10 people, the odds are something around 10%. I said 1 in 8, but you shouldn't really worry about it if you're not getting every job you interview for, because that's just how the odds are. And you need to realize that when you're searching for a job, all it really ever takes is one law firm. So one law firm is all you need to hire you. And if you are able to get hired by that law firm, then you get a job. But you need to understand the odds of getting a position, the fact that you're going to be rejected, and all these sorts of issues that you shouldn't really worry too much about. You shouldn't worry if you've applied to 100 places and not gotten a single interview. You shouldn't worry too much if you've gone out on 3 interviews and not gotten a job. And what I'm trying to make sure you understand, and I don't know that everybody can understand this because it's a very hard thing to grasp, but you have to be willing to get a lot of irons in the fire. You have to swing the bat a lot of times, and you're not going to hit everyone, but the more irons in the fire, the more places you apply to, the more geographies you're open to, the better odds you have. And most people, when they're rejected, a lot of them will give up. They'll think that there's no way they're going to get a job, that there's all these issues, but the only way you're going to fail is if you give up. And if you give up, you're the one that fails. And giving up is very common. When I work with people, I will send some jobs to look at first when I start working with them. But if they approve those, then I will send them more jobs. And then I will also send them like opportunities, which could be places that have interviewed similar candidates from them, firms that are strong in their practice area. And what happens generally when I start sending someone opportunities and they haven't gotten initial interviews is that they will give up. They'll think that the recruiter's done something wrong. It's too demoralizing to have to apply to all these places, and then they give up. But the people that don't give up, just keep applying and applying again, always get jobs. And you need to have a very tough ego to survive. So getting rejected, by the way, is nothing usually about you personally. No one is, by the way, looking at your resume and making personal judgments about you. All they're doing is looking at your resume and saying, can we make money off this person? It's a business decision. Do we feel like this person can make us the most money? Is this the type of candidate that we would hire, meaning your background and so forth? And if not, they'll just move on. But sometimes weird things happen. I've seen people. I saw one woman that had gotten out of law school and hadn't gotten a job and was doing family law, consumer bankruptcy, and just personal injury, and applied to this giant AmLaw 100 law firm and as like a 5th-year attorney, and was hired as an associate, which was just absolutely insane, because they wanted someone to do these kind of consumer-facing practice areas. She was doing immigration and everything for their clients. Unheard of, but none of that would have happened had she not just continued to apply to places and not worried about being rejected. And most attorneys are going to be rejected, not just in their job search, but on a daily basis. And sometimes you're in a firm and you can suddenly be on the outs. Your own firm may reject you, and you may get on the outs with people, and all of a sudden you're isolated and feel like you're just like the black sheep someplace. It could be an assignment that you did in a way that doesn't meet a senior attorney's expectations, a conflict with a partner. All sorts of things can happen when you're rejected on the job. When I was working in my second law firm, Dewey Ballantyne, there was this guy that had gone to Columbia Law School and had been a very good student and had gotten a job with this law firm. He was working for one attorney for 3 years, and then he said something that the attorney that he was working for, this well-known partner, wasn't a good writer, and told an associate, and then brought it up in passing to another partner of the firm. The other partner in the firm said something to the attorney that he was working for, and the attorney was working for, all of a sudden was so angry with that, stopped giving him work, and then got other partners in the firm to not give this person work anymore because they didn't like being criticized. And it was very funny. I was in the hallway one day, and in the firm I was at, you had the ability to look up people's hours. So you could look at their profile and see how many hours they had billed. I don't know why the billing system worked that way. But this guy literally had been at the firm after this happened for a full year without getting any work from anyone. And I saw him in the hall one day, and I'm like, "What are you up to?" And he was like rushing. He said, "I'm finishing this big motion," and it just wasn't true. So things, literally, people can just be rejected inside of a law firm, isolated, not given work, just for small mistakes. And sometimes these are just really stupid things, the people that happen, and you get rejected by your firm, and you feel like isolated, and it's psychologically like devastating. Like, imagine being someplace and not having any work to do, and just feeling there's something wrong with you, and it might have even been for something just very stupid, like I told you about just now. And so at least once in your career, something like that will happen to you, something you will suddenly be on the outs, or something you'll just be in a position that's not very good for you. It happens to most attorneys at different points in their career. It can happen when you're in house, it can happen when whatever, when you're in a law firm, but you often feel just completely isolated. And many times you have to understand that type of rejection from wherever you're at may have nothing to do with you. Sometimes it could just be for business reasons, like they may not have enough work, or you just don't know. And sometimes you just don't have any control over why you're being rejected. And so it's not something you often should get upset about. You should just realize that's what happens. And what I recommend everyone do is when you're rejected, you just need to keep pushing forward and realize that this happens to most attorneys, and watching things like this is a good step. But attorneys are, as a general rule, not very willing to tell you that they've been rejected. But most people in law firms are also like you and experiencing rejection, but they won't talk about it. So people don't go around and telling each because they got bad reviews or they're getting rejected. They try to maintain a face like everything is good. You just, as you experience this rejection, whether or not you're applying to firms, whether or not whatever situation you're in, you just need to keep going. You need to start fighting hard and applying to more places and fixing things. And I come back to this again and again, but if you're in a position where you're unhappy, or if you're not employed, you just need to really keep pushing forward and apply to as many places as possible and find as many places as possible. And everything will always work out. Every attorney that I know of that is in a position where they're unhappy, if they keep pushing forward and applying to places and not giving up, things will work out for them. So that's just an important thing to understand. The other thing about working in a law firm is you're always going to be criticized. It's pretty much, and it's something that you may never have even saw coming when you got into the profession. When you're a litigator, for example, you're going to be criticized by the clients, so your work's going to be critiqued by the clients. You have to keep them happy. Judges will critique you and talk to you about what they don't like about you in the court, and your client. The opposing counsel will be trying to attack you and finding weaknesses and things of what you're doing. Your colleagues will often be critical of you and trying to undermine you if they're competitive with you. Your superiors will be critiquing your work. So think about it as for a litigator. So a litigator has to make the client happy. And the client, obviously, people lose litigation cases half the time, and the other half they win. So if you're on the losing end of that, the client's going to be upset. You're going to have to appeal to judges, and judges will be critical of you. Opposing counsel is going to be attacking you. Your superiors are looking for you to make errors. Your colleagues are looking for you to make errors. Think about just how stressful that can be. It's extremely stressful. I know several people that were litigators that quit the practice of law very early. I've seen partners leave like in their early 40s. I've seen people die because it's just so much stress. Your body just can't handle it. And clients, just so you understand, are constantly going to be critiquing you. We know to get a client, you typically have to get work that they could be getting another attorney. And so you have to get that. And then when you're not getting the result the client wants, the client's going to be unhappy. And then the client's going to think there's something wrong with the attorney and be very critical of them. It's very common for an attorney to start a case or a matter for a client, and then they will try to make big promises to the client to bring them in. And if the client doesn't get the results that they want, then they're going to be very angry with the attorney. So you have to keep the client happy. And the client is going to be critical about your work. If they think you didn't do something right, they're going to be critical about the results that you got them. They're going to be critical about the bills. So think about that. So even if you have your own firm, You have to keep clients happy. I knew a guy whose father was an attorney, and he'd been practicing trust and estates law in Los Angeles, like very high-end trust and estates law for 30 years or something, or 40 years. And I remember he told his son, you're lucky if you can get 60% of the money that you build. So every time you build someone, you'd have a fight with them about money. When clients are, if you don't give them the results that they like, they're going to be very critical. They could sue you for malpractice. If you're working for a big company, there's going to be a general counsel looking over your work. There's just so many issues with clients that you're going to constantly be criticized by them, because you can't always get people the best results they want. Now, you can go into certain practice areas where you might be isolated from that a little bit, but clients are always going to be, to some extent, unhappy with you. And that's difficult. Again, like I talked about, litigators are going to be criticized by judges and dressed down by them, and they have to appeal to judges if they're going to be criticized by opposing counsel. So regardless of what practice area you're in, if you're up against someone else, that opposing counsel is constantly going to be critical of you. They're going to write you nasty emails. They're going to write nasty letters. They're going to write motions criticizing you. They're going to try to find weaknesses in whatever you're doing, and that's part of the job. But just think this is part of the criticism you're getting too. You're going to get criticized by your colleagues. So, you may be working, and people will try to criticize you to undermine your confidence. They'll tell you that you're not doing a good job, that you should leave. They're going to look to create problems and make themselves look better in the eyes of partners and so forth than you. So they advance. Even partners are critical with each other. And so that can be very difficult. So think about this. You're being criticized by clients. You're being criticized by judges. You're criticized by your colleagues. Then you're also going to be criticized by your superiors. They're right there to find fault with you. Sometimes you'll be sitting there working, and someone will walk into your office for an impromptu meeting and tell you're doing different things wrong, or make you feel badly about what you did, and all those sorts of things. So this happens all the time. It happens to partners in big law firms that have big books of business. People will criticize them too, and management committees. And I was working not too long ago with someone that was a very successful, well-respected litigator, and has been in the news and so forth, and generates a lot of money for his firm. I don't know if it's tens of millions of dollars, but it's at least 10 million. And in his review, he was told that he came across as too confident to his superiors. Imagine that, telling someone they're too confident who's doing very well. It can be very difficult to compose yourself when there's so much criticism, and then you're receiving it just like on a daily basis. And most attorneys, a lot of them, will not many, not most, but many just can't do this. They don't want to be in a law firm. They don't like feeling like they're constantly being criticized, and the stress, and that can become a lot. And it can be very difficult for people that aren't psychologically ready to handle that. Divorce, I've talked about this in previous webinars, but it's very high. They may say that the average attorney gets divorced 2 times more than the average person, but in large law firms, it's probably even more than that, because when you get home, if you have a significant other, you've been criticized and so forth at work and under all this pressure, and then you get home and you want to often withdraw. I mean, you want to feel some respite from that, but you may get home and you're criticized for not spending enough time at home, and whatever, fight with your spouse. And so the spouses are angry that you're working so hard and that you're not pleasant to be around because you've been to work in an unpleasant environment. And then you don't have more of yourself to give. And again, that ends up placing people get divorced quite often in that, because they're unhappy. Substance abuse is extremely common. I would say probably more than 50% of attorneys are using antidepressants and things to numb things of themselves. A lot of attorneys will drink too much, which is very common, and then they become dependent on things like that to help themselves. So some people become kind of desensitized to it as well, and that could be very unpleasant. It's very difficult, so you need to learn to adapt and be able to improve from criticism, but a lot of people don't. The more seriously you take criticism, the more harmed you will often be, and you need to learn from it. What do you do with all this criticism? The best way really that I can say is just to keep pushing forward, realizing that this is how it works different places, realizing that you can take that criticism and improve and give people what they want, but at the same time, you shouldn't let it define you. And you should also realize the higher you go in the legal profession, like the better the firm is, the more likely there is to be criticism. Why is that criticism there? It's because the big firms are under pressure to deliver a certain result to the client. They want attorneys that are responding to things and acting a certain way. And because of that, that becomes very important. And, if there's any consolation, one of the worst things that can happen to you many times, and it doesn't sound like a very positive thing, But if the criticism stops, then people feel like you're no longer worth criticizing. What'll happen in a lot of firms is they will be critical, but at some point, if you're not responding to that, they will just give up and they'll stop criticizing you. And what'll happen typically is once that happens, assuming that there was enough merit to the criticism will stop and people will stop even talking to you and you'll not start getting work. And so that could be very difficult. And if you have potential to improve, then you're going to get feedback that will help you improve. And if you're not threatening to people and you don't show the potential to improve, then you're going to have issues. But just realize that in your career, you're going to be subject to an incredible amount of criticism. You're never going to be able to feel like you're doing enough. You're constantly going to be on pins and needles trying to do better. And even if your peers aren't criticizing you, the opposing counsel is going to always be attacking you. So that's just part of the game of being an attorney. This is another thing that I think is important to understand, that no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, the legal market and where you're working is going to make you feel like you're never enough. When you're a law student, if you don't get the grades you want or get into a law school you want, you're going to feel like you're not enough. And that happens very early in most attorneys' careers. You're going to feel like you're not enough when you don't get jobs with the law firms you want to. Maybe trying to get a clerkship with a judge or something, and you're not going to feel like you're not enough if you don't do that. When you get into a law firm, you're going to feel like you're not enough if you're not working on the best matters. And then when you get a lot farther into your career, you're going to feel like you're not enough if you're not getting the largest clients, if you don't have the most business. All these things are constantly going to be haunting you for your whole career. You may feel like you're not in the best firm and you're not enough. So that often happens. So all these things, are constantly to remind you that you're not enough. And when it's difficult, even when people get in interviews and they're not getting positions, they feel like they're not enough. So think about this. No matter what level your career at, if you're a law student, you're going to feel like you're not enough. If you're in a law firm and trying to get interviews and not getting interviews, you're not going to feel like you're not enough. All these things, not getting the right work. Partners that have millions of dollars in business often don't feel like they're not enough, because I've even seen partners that have 20 years of experience and they could try to get jobs in certain law firms, and those law firms might even have grade point cutoffs. It's crazy. And so at every level of the legal profession, attorneys are constantly reminded that they're not enough. And the problem with all this is attorneys naturally want to experience success, feel good about themselves, but you never can. You never really feel, if you're working for other people, but even on your own, you're never going to feel like you're enough. So another thing, so you're under pressure to bill as many hours as you can in different law firms, and it never ends up. Sometimes you might bill 2,700 hours a year. I had one attorney, and he was told it would look good. After billing 2,700 hours, he billed 2,800. And it's just, that's insane. And so you're made to feel, regardless of what your hours are, they're not enough. There's always going to be people with more hours, and you're going to feel competitive with them. And so if you don't have those same types of hours, you're going to feel like you're not enough. And even business. So if you have $2 million in business, you might be encouraged and say you need to get 3 million, and the 3 million will be encouraged to get 5. So whatever you do, it's never enough. And there's more of this and that. So it could be, maybe you're told when you're in a review of your partner that you need to do more mentoring, or you need to be out giving more talks, and you're going to be reminded of that. And so all these things, no matter what you're doing, you're constantly going to be told you're not enough. And so every law firm, most law firms, are going to encourage the people that work there to do more and to give more. And unless you keep improving, you're dying. So you have to constantly be improving. You're always going to be told you're not enough. And as long as you work there, you never can really rest in your laurels. You're always going to be under pressure to improve. You're always going to be under pressure to constantly get better and better. And it's not easy. So just realize that anytime you're going to a law firm environment, if it's a well-run law firm, and I say that because run law firms are going to get as much money and time out of you as they possibly can, you're never going to be enough. The quality of your work may never be good enough. All these different things will hold you back as never being enough. You're often going to be marginalized. And what does that mean? It means that there's just various points in your career where you're going to feel marginalized, meaning you're going to be marginalized by other attorneys, you're going to be marginalized by your peers, you're going to be marginalized by your superiors, you're going to be marginalized if you don't have enough business. You're going to be marginalized when you're a young attorney, you're marginalized when you're an older attorney. Some law firms are retired at 65. There's just all sorts of marginalization. So if you look around in your peers, you often may feel marginalized. They will play all sorts of games with you in most firms. There's just so many different ways that your peers will marginalize you. Something to understand. They will make you feel like you're not doing enough. They will report negative things about you. All sorts of things can happen with your peers. And just think about the people that you're working with. Most people you're working with, by the way, are not your friends. They are you're competing with them. So anytime you expose your weakness to people that you're working with, whatever that weakness is, it could be things about your personal life, that can come back to haunt you. So you're always going to be marginalized by your peers. Just think about the people that you're working with, and they're looking for you to screw up. They're looking for you to not do as good of a job. They're looking for you to do things wrong, all these sorts of things, because they're competitive with you. And courts are marginalized people. So if you're a litigator, courts are always going to be, there's going to be judges that treat you well, judges that don't, but they're going to make you feel badly. Clients, like I told you about earlier, they'll threaten to leave and get another attorney. They will leave. So you're going to lose clients. You're going to have problems with them paying bills. They're going to have all sorts of problems with you. So it's very difficult to hold on to clients. And your superiors will always be marginalizing you. So they will compare you to other attorneys, tell you that you're not meeting your hours, you're not doing certain things right, you've done things wrong. So they're always ready to criticize you. If you don't have business and you're an attorney, you're very marginalized. And I'll just tell you right off the bat, this is one of the scariest things when you become a senior attorney, because if you don't have business, like all these doors in law firms just start closing. Now, you might get lucky and be in a certain practice area where business isn't required, like employee benefits or something. But in general, if you don't have business and you get senior, you're going to be very marginalized, regardless of what a good attorney you are. Just think about that. You could be like the most exceptional attorney ever, but if you're older and you don't have any business, then all of a sudden, all these doors are closing. When you're young, like I told you, you can be marginalized, but not just by the jobs you get, but the type of work you're getting. Sometimes you could be put on, you could start at a major law firm and put in some long-term document review. I've seen that happen. I had one guy that started at a major New York law firm, and they had him going out to Nebraska or something every week for 5 days a week supervising this big document review, this Nebraska company. And he was there for 2 years doing this, flying back and forth each weekend. And then the firm, when he got back, they let him go, saying he didn't have enough experience, like writing memo briefs and so forth. It's crazy. So every stage of your career, you can find law firms or people in law firms, and you're going to find yourself marginalized. And the only way to deal with it is to realize that this stuff happens and not take it personally, and take whatever lessons you can from that to become a stronger attorney. So everywhere you turn, you're going to be marginalized. And it's important to understand that's just how it works. And when you're marginalized, you have to get out of that rut, and you have to do whatever you can. Law firms also will lie to you. They're businesses. So businesses will often lie to people there. The law firms will lie about what they're going to do with compensation and all these other things. And it's not just law firms that are lying to attorneys. It's clients will lie to you. Opposing counsel will lie to you. Opposing counsel are very good, by the way, of saying you said something or you did something, and you may not have. So you're always going to have to look into being lied to. Law firms will lie to their associates. They may be told certain things about the firm's like when they're interviewing or after they get there. The law firms will lie about the amount of work that they have, the type of work they have available. So you may interview for a job, be told to be doing a certain type of thing, and then all of a sudden you get there and they don't have that sort of work. They'll be lied to about partnership prospects. So like I told you earlier, when you're between like your third and fifth to sixth year, they'll always give you good reviews, tell you you're doing really, really well, you look like you can be a partner because you're very profitable. And then when you start getting more and more experience, all of a sudden what they told you about being a partner no longer exists, and you're starting to criticize. But they took those years away from you, the prospect that that you believe you could be a partner. They'll lie to you about your compensation. That's very common. So law firms will say your compensation is going to be one thing, but then it may not actually end up being that. You'll be lied to about your billable hour requirements. Like you may be told that you can work a certain number of hours, but then you get there and it's not like that. It's very common, for example, for people to join boutique firms thinking that those boutique firms are going to offer them a lot less hours. And the boutique firm will talk about how people work less hours. But then when they get there, the boutique firm may bring in a large matter. And all of a sudden they're working in this boutique firm where they thought there was going to be less hours, and in response, and for them taking that job because they thought that it was going to offer more time, and all of a sudden they're billing as many hours for less compensation. You'll be lied to about things like employment security, that you're secure, but a law firm is a business, so they will always let you go if they don't have enough work. Why do they keep you around? As I told you, partnership potential. Law firms will lie to you. It's no different than a man telling a woman he just maybe loves her so he can sleep with her, but it's not, the partnership potential often isn't there. You will often be told you're doing poorly. And even when you're not, you'll be told you're doing well, even if you're not, because they have too much work. Sometimes law firms will lie to you about how well they're doing financially, and you get there and they'll start laying people off and closing. Law firms are good at lying. And I hear people when I talk to them, I talk to people every day when I interview candidates that law firms have said things to them that didn't end up being the truth. And partners are often lied to by their own law firms. It's very common when I work with partners that they join a firm and they're told they're going to get a certain amount of compensation, but they get there and everything changes. So a law firm, when they're hiring a lateral partner, may commit to a certain amount of compensation for 1 or 2 years and tell the person that the compensation will be raised after a few years. The goals are met, but once the person's there and transferred all their clients and becomes profitable, and they know it's hard for them to leave, they will not honor those compensation requirements. Sometimes people will join and told that they're going to get all this support and things. Partners will often join firms and told they're going to have all this associate support and stuff, and they won't. It's just there's so many different things that law firms will lie to people about, and it's very common for you're in this environment where your work's being criticized or you're insecure and all these different things happen, but the things will happen when you get there. Partners will often join a firm that's trying to start a practice area and or start a branch office. And then this commitment to doing this stuff can falter very quickly. It's common for firms often to open branch offices and act like they really are committed to them and then not be. Sometimes I've seen partners hired to start a practice group and they come over to a new firm. The firm tells them they'll hire associates for them and so forth. And then they don't. There's just all these different things, branch offices, politics. You get into politics and things, and then you're lied to by your opposing counsel. This is something that happens all the time. So you're having to fight against lies from opposing counsel in different matters. And your peers may lie to you and all these different things. And so it can be difficult. Clients lie to you. You figure out that your client's lying to you. So there's just all these different people are lying to you. So that can make the job be extremely stressful as well. If you look at your everything you've done, you'll see clients lying to you, you'll see opposing counsel lying to you, you'll see your peers lying to you, so your peers lying to you. So everyone at all levels, where it's partner or associate, is being lied to, and you're insecure. So this is another big thing. So no one is immune from feeling insecure. You're constantly going to be criticized, felt like you're not enough with the lying and all this thing that goes along. It makes you insecure. And the only time you may feel insecure is when you're a summer associate. You may feel like you're going to get an offer if you go someplace that makes all their offers. But typically, if you do get a job, you may have been under the impression that everything is going to be good. And then you get there and then you realize that you are insecure. So the time, you get to your first year associate, typically law firms will give you very poor reviews to get you to improve. Even if you felt like you were doing really well, sometimes they won't if they have a lot of work. But usually when you're young, early in your career, you'll start getting really bad reviews. And all of this stuff, regardless of the hours you're working, you're going to feel insecure. And that insecurity can happen in a lot of different ways. Once you get into a firm, you start getting criticized and you realize how difficult this is, and the hours are very long, and your work's not good enough for people. Many will start gaining a lot of weight. They will start abusing substances. They'll start getting therapists. They'll have all these problems earlier in their career because all the security and all this self-confidence they may have had as having gone to really good schools and gotten jobs with good law firms, suddenly they're in a position where there's tons of people that went to top law schools that they're competing with, and they're maybe doing better work. And they take that criticism and won't let it do the best. But a lot of people will just go in-house, or they'll try to go into environments where they're not criticized as much. And they realize that just because you got really good LSAT scores and good grades and went to a good law school, that doesn't make you immune. And so you allow the environment to dictate how you feel about yourself. A lot of people will do things like when they're exposed to that, will go try to find environments where they're not going to be subject to that type of criticism and insecurity. So they'll do things like volunteer in foreign countries or take jobs in the government that they might not have to, or all these different things that will make them feel good about themselves instead of feeling insecure. And the more senior you get, the more insecure you're going to have. And partners are insecure. It's just at all levels of the profession, people are insecure. And I should just point out that I've talked a lot about insecurity of associates and law students, but really I think the most insecure people are often partners because they're pins and needles trying to keep their clients, or trying to compete with other partners, or trying to get paid as much money as they can. And so they feel very insecure. And I think some of the most insecure people that I work with are partners. Then you feel cast out. Most people, because the law firms are so difficult, a lot of attorneys will be cast out of law firms and they won't know what happened. They may lose their jobs because there's not enough work. The law firm they're in may not need more people like them, so they'll get poor performance reviews. Maybe if they don't have enough work. As they get more senior, they'll be cast out of their enough business. Partners that don't have maintained enough business are cast out. So I have all the time, I work with partners that had business at one point, and then they lose business. And so then instead of being an equity partner, they make them a contract partner. And then eventually they will often ask them to leave because they don't have enough business. And that could happen. You'd be a partner 1 year and have $5 million in business, and then 3 years later have 800,000, and the law firm may cast you out. And it often happens very quickly. And so you could be cast out at all these different points in your career, when you're a senior associate, when you're a partner where you don't have enough business, or when you're just a junior associate not doing good enough work, or whatever, you're cast out. And these can be for all these completely inconsequential reasons that just seem completely stupid. Like I had a partner I was working with in upstate New York, and they had this casual Fridays, and one casual Friday he wore some jeans and there was a rip near his crotch, and some woman attorney complained about it and he was fired for that. And which seems crazy, but imagine if you've been a partner in some law firm for 15 years and you wear the wrong pair of jeans. The attorneys get fired all the time. So a lot of attorneys that have been in law firms and have seen how quickly people are fired, the only thing that they will bring to the office that's personal is like a small picture of maybe their family put on their desk. They want to have everything ready to go if someone just walks into their office and fires them, because that can happen. Sometimes you don't even know why. And once you are cast out, if you're fired and you have to leave, it can be very difficult to find another job. I've talked about all these things that are very difficult for attorneys. And what I'm trying to let you know is that there's a lot of insecurity in the profession. There's a lot of things that can affect your psyche and will demotivate you. And that's what the profession is. The higher you go as an attorney, the more criticism and so forth you're going to face. And so what do you do with that? The best thing to do with that is to actually, instead of getting depressed about it and giving up, you use it as rocket fuel. So anytime someone says something negative to you, you let that motivate you to do better, and you get angry and you don't get sad. So you don't take this stuff seriously, and you realize that in order to do really well in anything, you're going to need to be able to face criticism. You need to be able to keep going. And that's a mistake that most people make. They give up and they try to put themselves in positions where they feel like they're not going to be criticized, when in reality, the more criticism you put yourself in, you expose yourself to, and the better you do in response to it, you'll be fine. Another thing I just want to mention too is, because of the insecurity of a lot of law firms and how difficult it can be to get security, there's a couple things you should be doing. The first thing you should be doing is realize that if you're criticized and you improve and you stay there, then everyone else is going to leave, but you're going to be there. And so that being able to go through that in a law firm is a very positive thing. And just sticking to it. There's a risk in your law firm, like the criticism is unfair, that people are not advancing, that there's all these issues. Then I recommend everyone should be constantly looking at the market and seeing what kind of other opportunities are out there and applying to jobs, even if you don't think you need a job, and going down and interviewing, because the smartest attorneys really are always in the market. One thing that's interesting to me about partners, so I'll call an associate about a job, and the associate will say, I'm not interested, I'm really happy here, and hang up. If you call a partner about a job, usually the partner will always say they're unhappy too, but they're really, even if they're interested in looking, and most partners are actually much more open to looking at jobs than associates are, because they know that's important to have a good platform for their clients and to actually be in a better place. So just think about it this way. The best partners in most law firms will always be open to listening to a recruiter, and if the recruiter knows anything about the market that can help them, whereas a lot of times associates won't. And so you should always be looking at what's in the market. You should be taking calls from recruiters and talking to them, and not acting like there's something wrong with them calling you. You should be looking at jobs and that look good for you all the time. If you feel like there's all these issues in your law firm that you can't overcome, on LinkedIn, you should also be looking at jobs on Law Crossing. Law Crossing goes and looks at websites of job, or law firm websites and company websites. And those jobs are not advertised because it costs money to advertise, like on LinkedIn and Indeed. And so you can find a lot of opportunities there. But just realize that it's a very difficult profession, in my opinion, because of all of the stress and all of the things that happen being an attorney. The money often is not worth it. I mean, you can make more money doing other things with less stress, but often even the prestige is very difficult. There's not often a lot of camaraderie when you're working with attorneys, because they're very competitive with each other. Often, if you're in large law firms, there really is no advancement potential. So you go to work there, and unless you're able to bring in giant international businesses and things, you're going to have a very difficult time advancing. So that is just something to understand. There's different markets where it's easier to bring in business. For example, Asia, it's a lot easier for people to bring in business if they're working in firms there than it would be in large US law firms, which typically will make it very difficult for younger attorneys to bring in business. And it's important to understand that there's really not a lot of security there. There's not ever going to be a lot of security in most places that you're going to work in. And that's just something to be aware of. How do you get security? You get security by being in the right practice area at the right time. You get security by being in a firm where there's a lot of work. But if the work goes away, that's not good. You get a lot of security by having your own business, but it's just very difficult. And it's something that not everybody has the skills to do it. But the biggest piece of advice I can give you is if this is the path you choose, being persistent and not giving up is really the best thing to do. Always be looking at the market, being persistent, and a very difficult job. And you can look back oftentimes and see how you advance, how you become a better attorney. And if you're willing to stick with it. I will take a quick break. Then when I come back, I'll answer questions. This is a pretty short webinar because it wasn't a lot of information to cover, but I hope this is helpful. And then when I come back, I will take questions. I would encourage you to ask as many questions as you have. I don't see a lot of questions right now, so I will take the questions that people ask, but ask questions about what you would like to do in your career. I ask questions about what you would do, what I do in a certain situation. As many questions as you have, I will answer them as it takes. All right, let's go to questions. So just give me 1 second. Okay, I only see one question. That's all the questions people have. It's great. We'll just go with that. But after I do answer this question, if anybody has any other questions, please ask them now. It doesn't look like we have a ton of questions at the moment. And yeah, please, again, whatever your questions are, just ask as many as you have. I mean, this is, it's a great opportunity for you. I charge a lot of money to do coaching and stuff, so I can happy to answer questions here. All right, so I'm an international law student and being graduated this May. My specialization is national security and cybersecurity law. Definitely, I have an interest to start practicing the tech sector, though I have a low GPA. But so far, I know it doesn't matter if you have proper knowledge to practice or start a career in research area. How can I start my career here? What scope of tech specialized low GPA students here in USA? Okay, so this is a common question. People come over to the United States and they get LLMs and they want to get jobs at US law firms. I've written a lot of articles about this, but in general, if you're an international student and you're trying to get a job in the United States, you're competing with US JDs. So you typically will come get an LLM and you'll be competing against people that have gotten JDs. And in general, law firms, when they hire attorneys, they want people that are US attorneys that have gone to a JD program. The reason the JD program is important is because it shows your ability to take the LSAT and get good grades and get the best law school possible. And then once you've gotten into that law school, then you're compared to all the other students in your class in terms of your grades and so forth. So you really, if you want to work in the United States, you typically need to get a JD as opposed to an LLM. So you could go get a JD, get the best school you can, and then try to get positions like that. The next thing is you want to get into a national security and cybersecurity law. That's great. Typically, there's what's called the CIPP, I think, which is a data privacy thing, but that's also a very competitive practice area. So if you're trying to do that, you're going to be competing with U.S. attorneys, and it's very difficult as an LLM to compete with U.S. attorneys because law firms are more likely to hire U.S. attorneys because they're in the country. They don't require work visa sponsorship and all this sorts of stuff compared to what you would need, what a U.S. attorney would need. So law firms are always more interested in hiring American attorneys than they are foreign attorneys because American attorneys are likely to stay. They've gone through certain programs. They've been summer associates in big law firms. So it can be very difficult to break into that as a foreign attorney. So my best piece of advice would be to get into the best GD program you can and then get the best and then do the best you can when you're there. In terms of getting into this particular practice area, this is just for everyone on the call to understand. It was doing cybersecurity and that type of law was a very popular practice here a couple of years ago. But now most of that work, a lot of it has gone away. A lot of people went into it. It was a gold rush because there were a lot of opportunities. And not only that, there were very good in-house jobs. People were getting you could get a job as like a first-year attorney at Amazon paying like $275,000 a year. But those opportunities aren't really there anymore. Just because you've taken an LLM in something it still can be very difficult to get positions. So it's just that would be my biggest piece of advice for you. And then people that are interested in certain practice areas, you can try to interview with firms and say, I'm interested in the practice area, but in general, law firms are going to hire people. If they have the work, they're going to hire people for it. But if you have to get trained in something like that, it's going to be very difficult to get a position as an attorney. Okay, are there similar issues with military branches? For example, the JAG? No. So working in a military position like in the JAG isn't going to be, that particular environment isn't going to expose you to the same sort of stress generally that you would receive, that you would get if you were working in a law firm. Those are actually very good jobs. I think that the JAG is a pretty cool job for people to work in, but it's very difficult to transfer from the JAG into a law firm, or at least a really good law firm. So something to keep in mind. It can be very difficult to transfer to a law firm, but yeah, working as a JAG attorney can be a very good position. The reviews the JAG attorneys receive, so forth, are not anywhere near as stressful as what you would receive in a law firm. The JAG attorneys are good attorneys, but I think that's a very good career for people that like that sort of thing. Yeah, and keep asking questions. I mean, I'm glad some people are, but the more questions you ask, I'll answer whatever questions you have. And again, I charge $1,000 less than that. Well, usually a little more than that, but ask as many questions as you have, because I hope I can help in your way. Okay, back during the Great Resignation, when the market was hot, the interviews and offers I received all came through recruiters. I sent out my resumes on my own, but didn't get much traction that way. Now I'm here and the market is cool and firms are willing to pay recruiters, so I'm feeling a bit stuck and not sure how to move forward. Okay, so that's a good question. So the first thing is, law firms don't care if a recruiter's involved, because if you're profitable and you're the best candidate for them, there's no reason that they wouldn't use recruiters. I have solo practitioners and all these people I work with that use recruiters, and using a recruiter is not something that law firms are very concerned about. So what does that mean? If your billing rate is $500 an hour, I put this down. This is just to give you some perspective about why a recruiter is not really a big worry. So $500 an hour, which means you're going to generate 2,000 hours and generate $1 million a year, or $1 million a year, or 40,000 a week, 40,000 a week, for whatever work you're doing. So if a recruiter comes along, and this means, and if the firm has the money or has the work and they're not doing the work, or the work's not getting done, the recruiter shows up, the recruiter may charge, I don't know what the fee would be, but the recruiter may charge the law firm $40,000. I'm just saying what charge the law firm $40,000, which is a lot of money. So this is anybody that's interested in doing this is a good profession. But that's really nothing. The fee is really nothing, because every week the work's not being done, the law firm is losing $40,000. Work the law firm has not being done, the law firm is losing $40,000 a week. So why would the law firm care if they have to pay a recruiter essentially for 1 week of your work if they're losing $1 million a year without the work being done? Recruiters literally are like a blip on the radar for any law firm. It's not like, why would they not pay a recruiter if they have the work and they're losing money without it being done? So law firms actually love recruiters because law firms can help them make money. So that's the first thing. You should not worry about recruiters being involved. Often the recruiters too have a lot of value. So they're going to prepare you for interviews. They're going to know how to position you correctly. They're going to be able to get law firms interested in you by saying things about you in a way that appeals to what law firms want to hear when they're hiring someone. For example, you want upward mobility, you're stuck in a certain practice area, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. So the law firms can communicate in firms in a way that you probably couldn't do, you wouldn't be able to do as well on your own. So recruiter is not something to worry about. Ever worry about a recruiter's involvement, because law firms honestly don't care. Why would you care? If you could just think about it this way. If you could pay someone $300,000 a year and basically make $700,000 a year in profit from that person, and then someone showed up and said, hey, out of that 700,000, I would like 40,000, which is, what is that? That's not even 5% the profit that the law firm's going to make from you over a year. So they're just literally not going to be concerned about the recruiter. So that's the first thing. But now you're saying, so you received all these offers from the recruiter, that's good. Recruiters did do very well during that period of time. It was a very active market, but sending a resume on your own, you weren't getting traction. So what do? The only way to improve your odds of getting a position are to apply to more and more places. So sometimes you need to go and identify all the firms in your practice area that do the type of work you do. And it's cool. I mean, you can use all these AI tools and things now to find firms. I'll just show you real briefly. Just do a screen share here. You could go to, let's say I'm just using, you can use ChatGPT or whatever, but you could say, what are the law firms in Kansas City that have patent prosecution rights? Just as an example, as if you were like a patent. So I'm just showing you, you can always track down places to apply to. And I'm just using Kansas City as an example. They said they couldn't find 15 firms of specific focus, but they were able to find these firms and do it. So this is just one example. You could use this, or you could just use Google and search for places. But it's always important to do research and try to find as many places you possibly apply to. This is just an example of using Grok. You could do the same thing with ChatGPT, go to ChatGPT, and also find firms that way. There's all these tools that you can use, and then you could even use Google. So regardless of what your practice area is, you should be doing whatever you can to identify as many places as you possibly can apply to. So here, you can see you get all these firms here, and you go through here, and it's giving you this, and then this as well. Like you have a BCG thing coming at the very top. So just realize that there's tons of resources out there that you can use to find places to apply to. And when you're doing the search on your own, which there's nothing wrong with doing a search on your own, you need to be able to apply as many places as possible. Now, this is just something I want everyone to understand about markets. So that you're saying the market's cooled down. Yes, the market has dramatically cooled down from what it was during this Great Resignation, but all that means is that it's harder to find places that have the work that can make you money. What you're not really stuck. You just have to find places where there's a business case for hiring you. Law firms will hire you if they have the work. That's all. You hire you to have the work. So you can find those. You can find firms that will hire you by just applying randomly to places, and you can find places that have openings and all those sorts of things. But you have to be able to track down places to apply to, and you have to apply to places that don't necessarily have openings. And if you're not getting traction, that just means you need to apply to more places. And so instead of looking just in, for example, say you were a patent attorney in Kansas City, maybe you say instead of applying there, instead of doing that, maybe you do a search for, can you name 20 firms or 25 firms that do patent prosecution? And I'm just showing you an example of, how you would do this, but you would broaden your search. So you're in Missouri, I'm using Missouri as it's just an example. You can always find lots of places to apply to when you do this sort of research to in the market. And so all you're doing when you're doing this research and applying to all these different firms is you're finding places where there's a business case possibly for hiring you. And it's not something that you should ever take personally. So here, and you can see here, I got this huge list of places from ChatGPT of places in Missouri that do this kind of work. So if I was a patent prosecution associate or attorney, and I wanted to apply and find places, I would do something like this search right here, where you can see there's all these different places you can apply to for a patent prosecutor. Why would you apply to all these people? Because even if Kutak Rock doesn't have a current opening, if they see a resume and they have the work and they think they can make money off you, then they're going to bring you in to talk to you, even if they don't have an opening. So you need to, when you do a search, you need to find as many places as you possibly can. So I just use these two. I used ChatGPT and I used Grok, and then you could do the search on Google. Then you could you could even go. There's also this other one. It's called DeepSeek, is the Chinese one, and you can do the same thing with the DeepSeek. So you go when you develop these lists of places to apply to, and then you're finding all these firms in Kansas City that do that work. And sometimes I don't even know if this firm was there. So you continually develop the list of places, and which is cool. So that's, if I was a patent attorney and I was in Missouri, I would use these tools to identify every place and apply to as many of them as I could. The logic being that when you're applying to a lot of places, really what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to, you're just finding places is there a business proposition hiring you? So why is that important? So say we identified like 30 firms or 50 firms for you to apply to. Not all of those, some of those firms are going to have work and others won't. So it's something that you can control. The only thing you control is putting yourself in front of places that are likely, hopefully that helps. Okay. Yeah, it looks like there's a couple more questions, but yeah, the more questions everyone can ask, the better. So if you have any questions, please ask. Okay, you make the profession sound so broad and depressing. How is that compatible with encouraging an audience to get back up on the horse and pursue another law job? Yeah, so it is demanding, and it's going to be demanding however high you go. Keep in mind that the higher up you go in any profession, the more demand it's going to be. I was listening yesterday to this guy, and he was in college, and when he got to college, he ran a 4 minute and 3 second mile, which is just amazing for an 18-year-old. And when he did that, his coach came to him and said, okay, now you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to train harder, you do this, you diet, lifting weights, and then all these different things that he had to do. So even though he got to a very high point, he was going to have to work even harder, and he was going to have to do more, and he was going to be critiqued even more in order to advance. And this particular guy, when he got there, I don't have it in me. I don't want to do all this extra stuff so I can run a less than a 4-minute mile, and then he quit. So the profession can be very blunt and depressing, but you just need to know what's in store for you. And when these things happen, that's just what it is. And if you can be aware of what's going to happen and not make it or not externalize in the way you're going to feel badly about yourself, and just realize these are the rules of the game, you're going to be fine. But any profession where you're trying to do things at a very high level is going to be very difficult. People invest money and then they lose money, and they have to come back and learn from their lessons. Anything where you have there's a lot of potential to do very well is going to require you to endure an incredible amount of criticism, and in order to succeed. How do you get back up on the horse? You just keep getting back on the horse and learning from what has happened to you in the past, and then taking those lessons and making them allow you to be a better attorney. And then also realizing that a lot of times when bad things happen, I would say probably more than 50% of the time, it's not about you, it's about something else. When law firms, by the way, are doing really well and they have a lot of business and it's hard for them to get the work done, they're going to be very nice to their associates, or it depends on the environment you're in at the time. And so you just have to keep fighting and trying. And the worst thing people can do is give up. And people give up all the time. But just taking the criticism, realizing that it provides you a way to improve, and then once you realize the rules, it can actually get much easier for you as an attorney. Okay, this is people are asking good questions, so I do appreciate anybody who asks these questions. It's awesome. Okay, I'm a senior level attorney in non-management in a large insurance company. We do not have billable hours. Since I don't have any book of business, since we are in-house, how do I remain relevant among peers, and stay ahead of the curve within my small law firm office and maintain good reports so I can avoid bad politics? I've been there more than a decade, almost two, and there are many new hires coming on board, attorneys and staff, and I already mentor and have reached the maximum responsibility for my role, but have no opportunity to advance because management my office is all very fixed. 40 to 55 years of age, with no intention to retire, thus management postings are slim. I do get a pension and have no incentive to find a lateral job. How do I navigate remaining relevant? Yeah, so if you have a pension, that's awesome. And if you're a senior and you've been there for a long time, that's really good. How do you remain relevant? I'm not, where you're at, but you say avoid bad office politics. So every position, this is law firms and in-house, there's going to be politics. And so when politics are involved, people can either get on one side of the politics or another, or they cannot get involved. I was working a couple of months ago with this guy. He was a partner at a large law firm in Phoenix, like a mid-sized firm, but maybe, 75 attorneys in the office. And he'd been there for 20 or 30 years. And there was some political issue that came up, and he took one side of it, and that side lost. And he was the leader of this one side. And because he was on the losing side of this political issue, he lost his job after being there for, he was told he had 60 days to find a new job or something. So I would recommend never getting on the side of any political issues in your firm, and always doing the best you can just to remain neutral. I had something happen that was very interesting once. It was a firm in Washington, D.C. It was Dickinson Wright, and I was interviewing with them. I was going in to have a full day of interviews with the firm in their Washington, D.C. office, and there was this huge snowstorm. And I drove there and got there, and the office was closed, and there was only one partner there when I got there. And he started asking me about different things. And I said, well, I'm really excited about being a litigator and doing all this. And in briefs, I just talked about how enthusiastic I was about the work. And he took his glasses off, and he said, "You've just never worked in a law firm. You don't understand how competitive it is and how difficult it is and to do and how toxic it could be." And I said, I've always been in those type of environments, and what I've learned is I just have to not get involved, with my head down at work. And he really liked that. I don't know, he really liked it. And then he took me out to dinner or lunch. That's probably the most important thing that anyone could ever realize about working in a law firm is just, you just do your work and don't get involved in that stuff. And then it was a very nice guy. And he wrote me a thank you letter for the interview after the interview. But the point being that wherever you're at, you don't want to really take sides in anything. And then the more senior you get, the more difficult it is to remain relevant. But my advice to you would be just do the best work you can and try not to get involved in politics. And that's something that really screws up a lot of attorneys. You can see that happening right now with these firms in the Trump administration, and people not liking the response of the firms to Trump, them caving in, and then associates and things quitting. So anytime you get involved in office politics, it's going to hurt you. I've seen that happen, like in my own company, numerous times where I've hired people and they've decided that they're on one side, like they don't like the way Harrison's doing something or something, and they become toxic. And so you have to stay out of that. You have to keep your job. And I think once you're in house at something like an insurance company, you've been there for a long time with a pension, I think that it's probably pretty hard for them to let you go. And in terms of the management in your office, and there's no opportunity to advance, then just that's what it is. You shouldn't worry too much about it, but you should always just try to do the work that's in front of you to the best of your ability and not get involved in all that stuff, and just get a reputation of being someone that is very solid and isn't going to be thought of negatively by other people necessarily in the firm if you take sides. Lawyers who aren't currently working have a lower chance of being hired, understood. But how does one make it happen? How does one manage to convince a law firm to hire you for not working? And what if you haven't been working a long time, like an 8-year personal and family reason? My practice here is international arbitration. Okay, so that's difficult. The first thing is, if you haven't been working for a while, yes, it's more difficult to get hired. The reason being that law firms will think that maybe you left under bad terms or whatever, and so they're more cautious about hiring you. If you are a woman, for example, and you took 8 years off to raise a child, that's actually very respected. So law firms do not hold that against you as much as they would for other reasons, like if you just decided to leave for 8 years to go hiking or something, which people do. International arbitration is a very difficult practice area because there's not a lot of jobs in international arbitrations. That's one of the things that I would just caution you on. There's so many people that want to do international arbitration. They come over and get LLMs in the United States, or there's international arbitration jobs in law firms, but and most of them are in Washington, D.C. But that's a very difficult practice area to lateral into, especially if you haven't been working for 8 years. So what would I recommend you do? I would recommend you research. I don't know what your background is, but I would recommend you research as many international arbitration practices as you possibly can, and that you probably apply to not just the firm, but to whoever is doing who's head of the international arbitration practice area that the firms are trying to work in. And so what does that look like? I mean, it would look like the same thing I did earlier, where I was trying to show everyone how to find firms. You do the same thing as an example, or can you name 25 or more firms in Washington, D.C.? I'm assuming you're in Washington, D.C., but Washington, D.C. to international arbitration. So you're going to get all these different firms. And so typically, if you're applying to firms that have openings, it's going to be much more difficult for you to get a position there because you're going to be competing with people that are employed. So the smartest thing you can do often is apply to firms that have these practices. Unfortunately, you can see here that most of these are going to be these huge firms, but then you have a lot of these like smaller boutiques and mid-sized firms. I don't really consider Arnold and Porter a mid-sized firm, but you have all these different firms, and then you have all these different things, and then you can whittle that down. My advice to you is probably very hard for you to get a job at one of these top firms if you haven't been employed for 8 years, and because there's so much competition for them. So I would probably try to concentrate my search on looking at boutiques and smaller firms and so forth to get a position. And most of these are going to be very difficult. You're definitely up against a lot if you're trying to get a position in international arbitration if you haven't been working. So my advice would be to apply to as many places as you can. And if you are doing international arbitration, that's loosely related to litigation. So you could try to apply for litigation positions as well. But that would be my advice. But yeah, you're in a difficult situation if you're trying to get back to compete with other people for the same jobs. But yeah, law firms do respect people raising children and so forth, and it's not held against you, but your practice here is very difficult. Let's see. And any more questions too, just feel free to ask them. I've got a couple more to work through here. I'm a judicial law clerk seeking an associate position in the fall. Unlike other clerks, I graduated in 2018 and have 3.5 years of litigation experience in small and mid-sized firms and 2 years of corporate experience. I was told by a law firm's partner that post clerkship job openings for law clerks who only have or for law clerks who only have 1 or 2 years of experience. Boy, it'd be helpful if I included cover letters and flexible with my year when applying to firms. Okay, so these are good questions. Typically, if you're coming out of a clerkship, I don't know what kind of clerkship it is, federal law clerkship or whatever, that the practice area that you'd be applying to work in would be commercial litigation. So most clerks are candidates for commercial litigation positions. And when someone's hiring a commercial litigator, the clerkship prepares you very well to do commercial litigation. but you have 2 years of corporate experience as well. What would I do with that if I was you? So I'll just show you how the resume works. So resume, you'd have school, well, actually your school would go at the end. So school goes at the end after 5 years. Goes at the end. It would be no school. That's just a rule that everyone should know. It's good school. Then you have resume, name. Then I'm assuming then you have your resume clerkship, and then you have talks about litigation, and then you have job 1, job 2. So let's just say hypothetically that this would be job 2, this would be job 1. So let's say hypothetically job 2 was litigation. So you talk about litigation stuff. And then job 1 was corporate, unfortunately, corporate. So you would just say you were an associate, nothing else. You don't need to talk about, do not talk about corporate. So the reason you wouldn't do that is because you don't want the person that was currently a judicial clerk. And so it looks like mine didn't save it, but just go back to the resume, you have the name. So I got back to the resume, the name, clerkship, and then you have, and this is actually very important, what I'm talking to everyone about right now. So I want everyone to understand it because it's important, etc. So when someone reads your resume, like if you're a clerk, the clerk has to be commercial litigation. That's what people are going to hire you for. So if you have your clerkship, this is good, right? Good for good. And then you have job 2 saying that was litigation. Litigation is good. And then if you did corporate, and job 1, corporate, that's bad, right? So that's not something that's going to help you. So what do you do with that? You would basically, here, job 2, you would describe your experience. Hopefully this is the way things panned out, describe experience. And then in job 1, if it was just corporate, then you would just say I'm an associate, no other details. And the reason for that is because the law firm that's hiring you doesn't want to see that you might be interested in all these different practice areas. They want to see someone that's committed to one practice area. So your resume needs to read all about litigation. Now, if you're a clerk, there should be lots of different positions that you could work in. Let me just pull up the question again. I apologize. Q&A. Oh, so actually, if anybody had any questions, it looks like they were stripped out when this reset. So if you could put in any questions that I might have missed and ask them real quick. Otherwise, we're going to have to end the webinar. So I'll just spend a few minutes or two and put your questions back in. That would be helpful. But the idea is with your resume, it needs to look like you're doing one practice area, not others. But if you're a clerk coming in if you're trying to get a position as a clerk, you need to look all about litigation. So people need to be able to read your resume and think all about this person's litigation, this person's litigation, this person's litigation. You don't want them to think there's any seesawing in your practice area. So all resumes, regardless of the type of position you're seeking, a corporate attorney and you've done some litigation, you don't really want to talk about the litigation. You want to make sure that you remain focused on the practice area. Okay, so because these questions are stripped out, I only have one more question. So if you have any more questions, now's the time to ask them. How far in advance should I start working with the credit firms 3 months before I want to land or even earlier? So if you're looking for a position, you should start your search immediately. So it's not something that can happen instantly. One thing that people don't understand is like a search can take 3 months, but it could take a year. You have to be open to understanding that any type of clerkship or any type of job you're trying to get, it can take a long time. So some people do their searches and get jobs in a few months. Other people do their searches and it could take a year. It just depends. If you're looking for a position, you should always start as early as possible. Okay, I will wait a minute or so to see if there's any other questions. If not, I will end the webinar. So just if anybody has any more questions, now's the time to ask them. There were a bunch of questions here, but they got stripped out when my computer reset. All right, thanks everyone for being on this webinar. I hope it was helpful. The main thing that I was just trying to get across in terms of the main presentation was just that there are a lot of obstacles and different things that go along with being an attorney. You should understand what they are. Instead of allowing these things to hold you back, you need to use them as a rocket fuel to improve and realize that you're going through the same thing that everyone else is. One final piece of advice I would give you too is very few people are able to stick it out in the face of all of this stress and things that happen in law firms. But the people that are able to stick it out and take and learn from all this are the ones that actually end up succeeding. No matter what you're doing, you should realize that your ability to continually stay focused, not allow the stuff to detract you is important. And also when you're in these situations, to constantly be looking for a position. All right, thanks everyone for being on the call. And I will be back next week. I think the next week's webinar is, I'll just tell you what it is real quick. And I will send out the slides from this week's webinar. And let me just see what the next one's going to be. I'm giving people time to ask questions here. 7 deadly burdens of being a law firm attorney. So I think that's what it looks like the next week. All right, thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your week. And I will talk to everyone.